Before we start, please make sure to hit that subscribe button. Give us a like and share it with your friends and family. Also, please, can you tell me from where and what time you watching? Thanks. The house on Blackwood Lane. My name is Sarah, and this is the story of how my family encountered something we still can't fully explain. I never thought I'd be the one to experience something that feels straight out of a horror movie, but this is real, and I've lived to tell the tale. It all started when we moved into an old house on Blackwood Lane, a small road surrounded by dense woods at the edge of town. The house was built in the late 1800s, a sprawling Victorian with a wraparound porch, creaky wooden floors, and a history that the real estate agent conveniently left out. My husband, Mark, and I were excited. It was a dream home for a fraction of the price we'd expected to pay. Our two kids, Lily, 8, and Ethan, 5, were equally thrilled, especially about the idea of having so much space to play. The first few days were normal. We unpacked, explored the house, and adjusted to our new routine. The kids loved their rooms, particularly the attic, which was filled with forgotten relics from the previous owners. Old trunks, vintage toys, and dusty photo albums. They called it their secret treasure room. The first sign, it was a week after we moved in that I noticed the first strange occurrence. One evening, as I was unpacking boxes in the kitchen, I heard footsteps upstairs. Assuming it was Mark or one of the kids, I called out, "Dinner's almost ready." There was no reply. Curious, I went upstairs to find the hallway empty. Both Lily and Ethan were in their rooms, fast asleep. Mark was in the garage. I shrugged it off, thinking the old house was just settling. But the footsteps continued over the next few nights. They always seemed to come from the attic. The whispering? Lily was the first to mention the whispering. One morning at breakfast, she looked at me with wide eyes and said, "Mom, who were you talking to last night?" What do you mean, sweetie?" I asked, confused. "In the attic," she said. "I heard you whispering up there." I felt a chill run down my spine. Lily frowned but didn't argue. I tried to dismiss it, but that night, as I was lying in bed, I heard it too. Faint whispers, like a conversation just out of earshot. It was coming from the attic. The locked door. The attic had an old wooden door that was slightly ajar when we moved in. One evening, as Mark and I were watching TV, we heard a loud bang upstairs. Rushing up, we found the attic door locked tight. We hadn't locked it. Mark tried the knob, but it wouldn't budge. "Maybe it's just jammed," he said, retrieving a screwdriver. After a few minutes of struggle, the door flew open on its own, revealing the dark, musty attic. The air felt colder than usual, and I swore I saw movement out of the corner of my eye. Probably just the wind," Mark said. Though I could tell he didn't believe his own words. The shadow figure. The turning point came about a month into living there. One night, Ethan woke us up screaming. Rushing to his room, we found him huddled under the covers, shaking. "There was a man in my room," he sobbed. "He was standing by the window." Mark searched the room but found nothing. I stayed with Ethan until he calmed down, though I felt uneasy the whole time. As I turned off the light and closed the door behind me, I glanced back, and I swear, for a split second, I saw a dark shadow standing in the corner. The history of Blackwood Lane? The next day, I decided to dig into the house's history. At the local library, I found a file about Blackwood Lane that made my stomach churn. In the early 1900s, the house had belonged to a man named Thomas Greaves. He was a recluse with a reputation for strange rituals and behavior. Rumor had it he was obsessed with contacting the dead after losing his wife and son to illness. Neighbors reported hearing chanting late at night and seeing figures in the windows. Then one night, Thomas vanished without a trace. His disappearance was never solved, and the house sat empty for years until it was sold off. I couldn't shake the feeling that Thomas, or something he'd brought into this house, was still there. Confronting the unknown, Mark and I agreed we couldn't ignore the escalating activity. That night, we decided to confront whatever was in the attic. Armed with flashlights, we climbed the creaky stairs. The air was icy as we stepped inside. Everything looked normal at first, but then Lily's old toy, a spinning top she'd found in one of the trunks, started moving on its own, spinning faster and faster until it flew off the table. Mark grabbed my hand. "We're leaving," he said, but as we turned to go, the attic door slammed shut, plunging us into darkness. The whispers began again, louder this time, and the shadow seemed to coalesce into a figure. A tall, gaunt man with hollow eyes. "Mark," it rasped. We fumbled with the door, desperate to escape. Finally, it gave way, and we stumbled down the stairs. That night, we packed up and drove to a motel, leaving everything behind. The aftermath? We never returned to the house. A week later, we hired movers to retrieve our belongings, though they reported strange occurrences during the process. The house on Blackwood Lane remains empty to this day, shrouded in mystery. Conclusion. The house on Blackwood Lane taught us that some places carry the weight of their pasts, and not all spirits rest peacefully. Sometimes, the only way to survive is to walk away and never look back. The small coastal town of Ravenswood was known for its foggy shores and chilling folklore, but the tale of the cursed portrait stood above the rest. At the center of the legend was the Larkspur Estate, an imposing mansion perched on a cliff overlooking the sea. Inside its grand halls hung a portrait of Lady Eliza Larkspur, the last matriarch of the family who had mysteriously vanished over a century ago. It was said that anyone who spent the night in the room with the portrait would hear whispers and see shadows that danced beyond the flickering light of the fireplace. Some even claimed to have seen Lady Eliza herself, her painted eyes following them wherever they went. Over the years, the mansion fell into disrepair, and the locals avoided it entirely. When Eleanor Ellie Hayes received the news that she had inherited the Larkspur estate from a distant relative she'd never met, she dismissed the warnings of her neighbors. "It's just an old house," she said with a nervous laugh as she packed her car to head to the mansion. Ellie was a budding historian and saw the estate as a treasure trove of artifacts waiting to be uncovered. When she arrived, the mansion was exactly as she had imagined, towering Gothic and breathtakingly eerie. The front door creaked as she pushed it open, revealing a grand foyer filled with dusty chandeliers and cobweb-draped furniture. Her eyes immediately fell on the portrait of Lady Eliza prominently displayed above the fireplace. Eliza's painted gaze was piercing, her dark eyes almost lifelike against the dull background. She wore a deep crimson gown, her gloved hands folded delicately in her lap. Ellie couldn't shake the feeling that the woman in the painting was scrutinizing her, silently judging her presence in the home. Determined to prove the stories wrong, Ellie decided to sleep in the room where the portrait hung. She set up a cot near the fireplace, surrounded by her research notes and a few candles. As the night deepened, the howling wind outside seemed to echo through the empty halls. Ellie focused on the journal she'd found earlier, which chronicled the history of the Larkspur family. By midnight, the atmosphere in the room shifted. The air grew colder, and the shadows cast by the candles seemed to elongate unnaturally. Ellie heard a faint whisper, soft yet clear, calling her name. She froze, her eyes darting to the portrait. Lady Eliza's painted lips, once still, now seemed to curl into a faint smirk. A loud knock echoed through the room, followed by the sound of footsteps above. But Ellie knew she was alone in the house. Summoning her courage, she grabbed a flashlight and climbed the staircase. The sound led her to a locked door at the end of the hall. Using an old iron key she had found earlier, she opened it to reveal a dusty attic filled with forgotten relics. In the corner of the attic, Ellie found a large trunk. Inside were letters and photographs that painted a sinister picture of Lady Eliza's life. She had been accused of witchcraft and was rumored to have cursed her family before her disappearance. One of the letters, written in a frantic hand, warned Eliza's vengeance will never rest. She is bound to the house, and her portrait holds the key. As Ellie read the final words, the attic door slammed shut, and the room plunged into darkness. The flashlight flickered, and Ellie felt an icy presence behind her. Turning slowly, she was face to face with the ghostly figure of Lady Eliza. Her once beautiful face was now gaunt and hollow, her eyes filled with anger. "You should not have come here," the spirit hissed, her voice reverberating through the attic. Ellie bolted, clutching the letter as she fled down the stairs. The house seemed alive, its walls groaning and doors slamming on their own. The whispers grew louder, urging her to leave. She ran back to the room with the portrait, where she noticed something she hadn't seen before. A small inscription at the bottom of the frame. It read, "To free the curse, destroy the eyes." In a moment of clarity, Ellie grabbed the fireplace poker and swung it at the portrait. The glass shattered, and the painted eyes began to bleed a dark, viscous liquid. Lady Eliza's ghost screamed, her form distorting before disappearing in a burst of cold wind. As dawn broke, the oppressive atmosphere lifted, and the mansion felt strangely peaceful. Ellie packed her belongings and left the house, vowing never to return. Later, she donated the letters and artifacts to the local museum, ensuring that the story of Lady Eliza would be remembered. Conclusion. The curse of the Larkspur estate ended with Ellie's bravery, allowing the restless spirit of Lady Eliza to finally find peace. Sometimes, facing the darkness is the only way to bring light to forgotten truths. The Silent Village. In the heart of an uncharted valley, hidden from modern maps, lay the village of Ashenwood. For centuries, it had been abandoned, its crumbling houses and decaying streets overtaken by nature. The legend spoke of a curse that fell upon the villagers after they defied an ancient warning. Do not disturb the stones in the grove. Samir, an adventurous journalist, heard of the legend while researching forgotten places for his blog. Fascinated, he decided to explore the mysterious village. Armed with his camera, a notebook, and a flashlight, he set off into the valley despite the locals' dire warnings. The village in ruins. Reaching Ashenwood at dusk, Samir found a place eerily frozen in time. Houses with broken roofs leaned precariously, and the cobblestone paths were covered in moss. At the center of the village stood the grove, a circle of ancient stones carved with cryptic symbols. A cold breeze swept through the air, carrying with it a faint, unplaceable whisper. Ignoring the unease clawing at his gut, Samir began recording. "This is Ashenwood," he narrated, "a place swallowed by its secrets. Tonight I'll uncover what really happened here." The first night, and as night fell, the silence deepened. Samir set up his tent near the grove, intending to stay overnight. Around midnight, he awoke to the sound of soft singing, melodic yet haunting, drifting from the grove. Grabbing his flashlight, he ventured out. The grove seemed alive under the moonlight. Shadows danced between the stones, and the air shimmered as though the place was breathing. The singing grew louder. Samir froze as he saw figures transparent and glowing standing near the stones. They were the villagers, their faces gaunt and sorrowful. "Who are you?" Samir stammered, his voice trembling. The villagers turned toward him in unison. One stepped forward, her face frozen in a perpetual scream. "You should not have come," she whispered. The curse revealed. Samir stumbled backward, but a strange force pulled him closer to stones. He fell to his knees as visions flooded his mind. He saw the villagers in their prime, happy, thriving. Then he saw their greed. They had desecrated the grove, breaking one of the sacred stones to build a monument to their wealth. Their act awakened something ancient and malevolent. In his vision, the earth split open, and darkness poured out, swallowing the village in one terrible night. The villagers were cursed to wander the grove for eternity, bound to the very stones they had defiled. A desperate escape. The vision ended abruptly, leaving Samir gasping for air. The villagers closed in, their translucent hands reaching for him. "Leave." They chanted, their voices rising into a deafening crescendo. Samir scrambled to his feet, grabbing his camera and flashlight. The grove seemed to twist and warp around him as he ran, the stones glowing with an ominous light. He barely made it out of the village as an unnatural fog descended, swallowing Ashenwood once more. The morning after. When Samir reached the edge of the valley, the first rays of sunlight pierced through the trees. He collapsed, relieved to be alive but haunted by what he had seen. The footage he captured was inexplicably blank, as though the village had erased itself from his camera. Though he returned home safely, Samir could never shake the whispers he heard at night or the fleeting shadows that followed him. Ashenwood was not done with him, it never would be.